Greetings, friend! How are you doing today? I have a couple questions for you today. A couple questions. My first question for you. Have you ever seen one of those tug of war game? Tug of war where there are two different individual or two different parties usually pulling a rope, so the rope goes this way or that way. Have you ever seen one of those? Second question. Have you ever feel like you are the rope in a tug of war game? Perhaps not physically, but perhaps inside of you, you feel that you are being pulled to two different directions. Something where your mind want to do this, but your heart want to do that. What your mind said you should do this, da, 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 and your heart's calling you to something else. Or perhaps you are in a life situations where you are interacting with two different people, two different parties, and you are being pulled to two different directions. Have you ever have any experience like that? And if you do, what do you do then? Well, Kenny Loggins, whom I have the privilege, the honor, the joy to listen to his interview this past weekend with my mentor, says that when you are in a tug of war game, whenever he is in tug of war game, and Kenny Loggins is a multiple award winning singer-songwriter, what he does is, one of his tips for us is trust in your heart even though your mind want to doubt it. So for Kenny Loggins, whenever he's in a tug of war, he said one thing he does is he trusts in his heart even if his mind want to doubt it. And so sometimes you have a tug of war game inside of yourself. You're like, I should do this even though I feel called to do this. Your mind saying you should do this. Your heart saying it will be better for you, you'll be better off, or you would love to do something completely different. And perhaps sometimes you are in a situation where two different party. What do you do then? He says, well, listen to your heart. Which ways your heart wants to go. And many of us, we rely on our mind, on our logic very much. So did I. Being a scientist, being a doctor, I was highly trained to rely on my logic, gotta be logical and things like that. And over the years, studies shows, and I learned that our heart actually has intelligence. Our heart is actually another thinking center. Many people say, oh, those heart matters thingy, those mushy smushy kind of thingy, those are just not for me. I'm relying on intelligence. What do you know that your heart has intelligence? And actually the intelligence in your heart is a whole lot more sensitive as well as a whole lot stronger than your mind. Study shows this. The HeartMath Institute shows many of these studies where the vibrations and the energy from the heart move faster than the mind and has much more power than the one from the brain. And the heart is also a lot more, because its energies ripple out, then it can sense things that's still way out there before your brain can register. The heart already register. And so when you are in a tug of war, whether you're being called by some in yourself or in life situations, sometimes more in life situations, Kenny Loggins, with his success, says, listens to your heart. Listen to your heart. Now, sometimes you say, okay, yeah, well, I listen to my heart, all right, and then now I'm still kind of in a spin. Have this ever happened to you? You're like, okay, I listen to my heart. My heart saying this. I'm listening, and then now what? I'm still after that. Have you ever done? You listen, and then you're like, oh, really? Oh, gosh, oh, now what? Well, there are two things there. I looked this up really quickly. It was kind of fascinating because since I was thinking about this tug of war, there are two main things to win a tug of war game. Once you decide, and the word once you decide, what are two basic fundamental that will allow you to so-called thrive in this tug of war game. And the first thing is there. So there are two things. The first thing is definitely grounding. Believe it or not, the tug of war, the tips for winning tug of war game says the over and over they said grounding, grounding, grounding. So how do you ground? How do you ground what it is that you now listen to your heart? Well, you ground it by making a decision. Okay, this is grounded. You're not saying, okay, I'm listening to your heart, and then you're looking back and like, did I really listen to my heart? You make a decision. So one way to ground your whatever you choose to follow is once you choose it, you decide that it is, and not going back and forth. Another things that can help many people ground is if you actually write it down. You write it down, and even more if you express it, particularly if you express it to someone you can trust, perhaps not just anybody, but someone you can trust, and so you ground it, and whomever you ground can be your accountability partner too, and that's a way of grounding actually. So you ground it, just like in tug of war game. If you imagine this, if you don't have grounding, your footing slip when you playing tug of war. Hello, game over. The other the other party will win, right? Because you don't have your grounding, gonna get pulled. So you got to have your grounding. And the other things that help, the other fundamental thing that help winning tug of war game, perhaps it's tug of war game of your life or your situation, is to actually have friction. To have friction. If there's no friction, imagine you playing a tug of war game and you just put a ton of lotions on your head and it's super slippery now. Well, the rope, you're not going to even be able to hang on to the rope, right? You got to have friction. Now, how do you create frictions? Frictions does not mean antagonism. Frictions does not mean fight. That's not the frictions. That does not. So for some of us, when we hear the word friction, we immediately imagine conflict. We immediately imagine antagonism and things like that. And it's not necessarily. Friction is just a friction. But how do you create friction? One way you create frictions is through motion. You can have two things. Think about this. You can have two things. Let's say you have a carpet with very long tufts. And then you have a piece of furniture sitting on that carpet. If the furniture just sit there on the carpet, happy and comfortably, and you do not even have you don't have an intentions to move it even half an inch, well, it sit there. And even though they have a potential to create friction and energy between the two, if you're just sitting there and doing nothing, there's no frictions, there's no energy created in between them. But now, if you now imagine you are going to apply motion, you're going to move this furniture. The motion is create the frictions, isn't it? Now you say, okay, there is this long tough carpet, there is this furniture, we're gonna move this. Guess what happened? The motions create the friction instead of we just sitting like that. Well, there is contact, but it doesn't mean there is frictions, doesn't mean there is energy. So, what does translate in the, if it is not in the physical word, but it's not in the literal word, in your tug of war game, the next thing you need to do once you got it grounded is to create motion. Motions mean actions, right? And so take the actions of what it is that you have grounded. Take the action of what it is that you have decided. Take the actions for what it is that you have chosen, listening, as Kenny Loggins says, to your heart. So I invite you to just share in the comment below if you'd like to. If you ever been in situations where you are in a tug of war, and if you did, what do you do? Or perhaps right now you are in a tug of war about life, about between parties that try to influence you? Perhaps it's in yourself, as Connie Logan said. Sometimes your mind says you need to do this, and your heart wants to lead you to the other way. And so, in that scenario, what's leading you? What's your heart typically very quietly? The heart doesn't usually scream and holler, right? The heart is very gentle. And so what's your heart? Very gently and often very quietly trying to tell you, to help you, to lead you. And so please share in the comment below if you are in a tug of war. And if you welcoming support, then feel welcome to reach out to me directly, definitely. At any time, message me directly and perhaps share in the comment below. It's always great to share experience. Share in the comment below if you ever been in a tug of war game and you decide to listen to your heart and what's the outcome. Or if you have already decided on a tug of war game recently, in a tug of war of your life at the moment, then what are you doing to ground? What are you doing to ground what it is that you have decided? And then what are you doing? What are you doing for the motion part to create the friction such that you will win, that you will succeed, that you will thrive in this tug of war game, your current tug of war game? And even if you don't want to share this, I invite you to think about this and write it down for yourself. Sometimes some of us shy, we don't want to share, that's okay. But for you to apply this, for you to take benefit of this, my mentor always says, inspiration without action is merely entertainment. I'm happy to entertain you, but if you want to take this to benefit your life, to allow you to create an even more joyful, abundant, thriving life, then write down for yourself. I encourage you to do that. Just write down on a piece of paper. So how are you grounding this? And what motions are you taking so you will thrive to you and your decisions, whatever that you choose in this tug of war game, will thrive and succeed, and you will be in more peace of mind, more ease, more joy, more abundance, more success, creating a beautiful, thriving life one day at a time, kind of whole magnificent, thriving life as a whole. And this is Bridget with From Grieving to Joyful Living. I look forward for your comments. I look forward for your shares. And I look forward to see you again very, very soon. I love you very, very much.